Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank 1 minute at a time. I am your co-host, Hugh.
And I'm your other co-host, Dev. And on today's show, we're going to be looking at minute 32 of the movie, in which Debbie really kicks into gear with her interview of Martin, and we'll see how that goes.
Joining us all this week on the podcast is Bubbawheat of the Fight Club Minute Podcast. Welcome, Bubba.
Hey, it's good to be back.
Absolutely. We had good fun yesterday. So, just out of interest, how did you first come to the film?
Well, this has been a film that's been on my radar for ages. I think the first time that I really caught a bit more of the movie was that I believe that they tested the microwave bomb on an episode of Mythbusters.
Oh, yes, they did.
And but other than that, it's been one of those where I keep putting it off, and I finally watched the movie for the first time earlier this morning.
Oh,
okay.
Wow.
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
So did you watch the whole film through, or have you not quite finished it? Or
Yeah, I was able to finish it. I tend to be a serial procrastinator. I'm usually not this bad, but I did finish it, I would say about 20-25 minutes before we started recording.
Okay. This is good. This, I think, is the first person we've had who's watched the film specifically to record this. So this is kind of exciting. And what did you think of it?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was funny because my wife thought that this was like a prequel to, I believe, the movie's War Inc., where John Cusack plays a very similar character with Hilary Duff as his daughter.
Yeah, and technically, that was actually developed as a sequel, and then they changed it along the way to when they were going into production. Which is so. Yeah, it is really a prequel. So that's cool. Have you seen anything by George Armitage, directed by George Armitage before? Or?
That I don't know. I would have to look at his filmography.
Yeah, the main one.
The name doesn't sound familiar to me.
Yeah, well, he hasn't done that many, but he's had quite a long career that goes right back to the 70s. But the film he was most known for is the one he did before this, which was called Miami Blues, with Alec Baldwin and Fred Ward. Which is an adaptation.
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's a really decent adaptation of a Florida-based comedy crime novel, hardboiled novel, and it does real justice to it. Hank Mosley, the cop character in the books, is played by Fred Ward, and there's the tonal balance that Armitage brings to Grosse Pointe Blank is exactly what he kind of he developed on Miami Blues. So it's kind of an interesting film to go and watch if you've seen Grosse Pointe Blank. Because it suddenly becomes quite clear it's definitely the same guy.
Yeah, I did go back and watch that the other day. I hadn't seen it previously.
Okay,
it does not hold up nearly as well. I feel
no, I agree.
The tone. You're right. He's definitely refining it, and it's not quite there. I think in Miami Blues, but you can see where it's coming from. You can see how this came from that film.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting that there's a thing happening at that time in the water in terms of not just a whole wave of crime novels being written and hardball fiction having a big renaissance, but it's also the fact that Hollywood is still trying to figure out how to adapt them properly. And there's various experiments in the 80s. Some work, some don't. And I think one of the prime mistakes most of them make is. Because they want to save money and film in LA, they will take them out of cities that are more atmospheric or appropriate for the crime scenes in question, and put them in sunny LA, and so that often changes a mood entirely. I mean, 8 Million Ways to Die is the classic example because that's a New York set novel, and suddenly it's bright sun and Jeff Bridges in Hawaiian shirts and whatnot, and it's just very different. And I think that's one of the interesting things here is again Grosse Pointe Blank and Miami Blues both. This is all part of. I think part of the comedy of Grosse Pointe Blank comes from when it comes out and the fact that it's coming after all of these attempts And there is something really ironic about shooting the entire thing in LA, but making such an effort to make it be Grosse Pointe, Michigan. I feel like that's almost the joke itself. Is that they're actually doing it? It's almost built into the film itself as this kind of sense of parody of what these films are like.
Yeah, and it is noticeable when you think about it in terms of the weather and the climate and stuff, because it is unbelievably sunny and bright blue skies all the time, apparently, in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, for this movie.
Yeah, having a good summer.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh dear. But yes, coming back to Debbie then, and the interrogation rather than, I mean, we called it an interview last episode. I'm starting to feel like this is where it ramps up into something far more direct.
I love that little monologue she does right at the start, and she just pulls the mic in to really underscore that it's a $700 prom dress. Always sticks in my head, that bit, because it's just like the bitterness is still there 10 years later.
Yeah, that she is not she's not leaving anything to chance. That microphone will pick up the way she feels.
And I like how, like, after that, Martin does pull in the microphone himself, so to make sure that his answer is getting picked up and that he is showing that he's fully participating in this interview, at least at this point in time.
Yeah. And again, it's his mirroring, isn't it? He kind of. I can't remember if she ever notices that, because he's using that technique, isn't it? That thing of mirror the other person, and then maybe they'll be on better terms with you because they will subconsciously go, "Oh yeah, we're the same," and of course, clearly not what you should be doing with her. But he does it; it's habit with him, along with all his other habits.
Yeah, his performance in this minute is just fantastic. Like the agitation, the fiddling, like looking at everything, just like he really, really does sell it so well in this minute that he's just so out of his depth.
Yeah,
and out of control, which I think is the thing that he's really not used to, right? Is not being in control of a situation.
Yeah, one thing that I had forgotten about whenever I brought it up last episode, but it's actually Debbie that closes the second set of blinds, and that's whenever he uses the opportunity to switch seats. And I also like that as he's watching her go up, he does just this great little eye flick where his eyes flick over to the outside window, and that gives him the idea of switching seats because he knows that the government agents are out there.
Oh yeah, of course. Do you know? I always forget. Right, like every time I've watched this movie, I always forget we've just seen them outside, and he knows they're outside. Like there is perfectly It's what he's doing is reasonable in the context, but I'm so into what their relationship is that I'm just like taking her view and looking at it, going, "Yeah, what is wrong with you, dude?" But actually, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's perfectly reasonable in that context. Like, oh yeah, they are out there. I still can't believe those two agents. I love how quickly they go from guys talking about killing people and stuff in a few scenes ago, and to comedic value of eating in their car and wanting to ring in and make comments. Just so funny.
Yeah, those two guys are definitely some of my favorite characters in this movie, because they have just this nice arc that goes through the whole movie where I think initially you're supposed to think that they're hitmen, and then they reveal that they're actually government agents, and that's why they're not killing him immediately. They have to wait for him to do something illegal so they can kill him. But at the same time, they're also, they're not necessarily good cops because they're not wanting to wait until he is on the verge of doing something so they can stop him. They want to let him kill whoever he is going to kill so they can then kill him.
Yeah.
And also the fact that it's Hank Azaria as one of them, because he is always a fantastic actor. And I didn't look up the name of the other guy, but I it took me a minute, but I recognized him as a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah,
He
Mm-hmm.
was Mr. Trick in the first
Yep,
half of
that's
season
right.
3.
that's him.
Yeah.
Yep,
K. Todd Freeman, is it?
I think so. I think that's what you said in a previous episode. Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Again,
it's one of those things. I would love to see more of the two of them in this movie.
yeah.
I can see how it got pulled. I think it would distract from the core story a little too easily, but they are just fantastic. In
Yeah,
so many
and I
points in
almost
this film.
like I was almost expecting them to eventually be on Martin's side by the end, because
Mm,
they start to get a little invested in his personal life, like especially whenever they have the moments whenever he's taking Debbie to the reunion, where
mm,
it seems like they're really getting invested in his personal life and starting to forget about the job, but then they end up sadly getting gunned down at the end along with everybody else.
mm.
Yeah,
There. Have you guys seen the TV version of Fargo that Fox have been doing for the last few years? Quite a few
seen
years.
the first season or two.
Right.
I
So
have
is
not.
okay. Season. So yeah. That's very much. It's an interesting riff on the Coen Brothers world without being precisely slavish to the Coen Brothers. But there's a couple of feds in, I think it's season 1, played by Key and Peele, and I've just realized that what they're doing is these two guys. It's only just hit me because the way they play those characters, I remember thinking it was so funny and I really enjoyed it. But it's so similar, so similar. I can't believe that they weren't riffing on the two guys here. I just can't. They must have been because it's so similar. But yeah, no, there is something about the way Freeman and Azaria approach what, even by the time this film comes out, is a cliche of the genre, but they approach it in what feels like a reasonably fresh way. And as you say, the emotional investment is fascinating. That's quite fun, because I never get the impression they're investing in them simply because, like, it's never going to stop them killing him at the end. They're just like, oh, look at him, this guy's trying to do right. There's a kind of sort of something he gets under the skin of their jaded, cynical attitude a little bit. Um, but yeah, it's not going to turn into a John Woo film, and it's suddenly going to be like, respect, yes, let's back to back fighting the other guys, which is, I think, where it kind of leans toward. And I think that's the other thing, thinking as a John Woo fan, I do think also a lot of what is being parodied in this film is the American interpretation of Hong Kong filmmaking, because at this point we've had quite a few American films by various Hong Kong filmmakers, and I feel like that's part of what's happening in the film, is a sense of the parody of that as well. I mean, you don't bring in Benny the Jet as they do later on for
Yeah,
without
yeah,
knowing that people who know who he is will get why he's there, and the two
and
guns
and
thing
yet,
as well.
I mean, it is quite a small part of the movie, though. That
Mm.
it's really just that school corridor sequence that really, in any way, references it, because there's not really any close quarters fighting aside from
No,
that
but it's,
scene.
it's it's the two guns thing. It's the way
Oh, there is that. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it's
true.
the way they do the because by this point in time you've also had the first 5, 6 Steven Seagals as well. So the whole cliche of the Ultimate fight, like, that is 20 years
Yeah,
of American crime films in which somebody walks into a bodega or a grocery store and there's a robbery happening, right? Like, that's just a given. But then the fact that one guy's using a submachine gun and he's using twin pistols, and then it still manages to miss him completely, and then also at the end as well, where it's all about two guns reloading. It's that very much that thing that the Hong Kong movies had kind of started to influence in American movies,
yeah.
particularly with the back-to-back thing by the wall. That's pure John Woo, but we'll talk about that later when we get there. I mean, like
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah,
but like here,
yeah,
here in this moment in time, the two feds, the two government agents, yeah, there is something about the way they start to really get into this couple. You just wonder, would they root for them? Would they have helped them? I think they wouldn't have, and yeah, I still think they'd have gone all the way to the end for them, and then gone, yeah, but we still got to get rid of you. Bam.
yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, that's pretty much what they're trying to do, right? Like, but
I mean,
yeah.
are they just trying to keep themselves amused? Like they're so bored.
I kind of feel that's a big part of it, right? Like, I think it's one of those things when you're on a stakeout, like the things that suddenly become interesting would never
Right.
actually like interest real you, right? Like, it's just there's literally no other options, right? All of a sudden, trying every flavor of potato chip or every different soda from the convenience store is suddenly the greatest thing ever because your world is narrowed so much that that's what you have available to you at this point.
I would totally do that. Like if I was stuck for that long and there was a convenience store nearby, I would completely work my way just through the things on the shelf. Oh, that's so true. That's so true. Wow. You're there for a job, but hey, in the meantime.
Yeah.
I've never been in the military. I've got friends who've been in it, and they do talk about the whole thing about hurry up and wait, which is a lot of the job is just waiting, and so yeah, silly things happen while people are just waiting.
Yeah, one other like little acting moments that I noticed in the minutes that I really like is during that seat switch. I do really like how Minnie Driver doesn't she just completely takes it in stride. Like she takes a beat, she blinks, and then she just sits down and keeps on going.
Mm. It is cool. It's both professionalism and some sort of instinct about Martin himself as well, isn't it? She knows him
Yeah.
well enough that she's like,
And that cut to Martin looking a little sheepish, like he suddenly realized he's been caught doing something as well.
Yeah. Oh, it's just so good how they just fill in these little lines of between in the space between that show us the relationship as it was. You can really imagine them when they were younger.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
And it does feel like that, they still have that energy about them in
Yeah.
this whole radio sequence.
Yeah, because the energy is going to change later. So yeah.
This was minute 32 of the Grosse Point Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers, and co-producers, myself, Dev Sodiga, and Hugh David.
And today's guest, and our guest all this week, is Bubbawheat of the Fight Club Minute podcast. Bubbawheat, where can people find you online?
Well, as the best place to find me is on any social media. You can just find me where I'm at Bubbawheat. It's a unique name, and that's why I haven't given it up in favor of my real name. But I'd say Instagram is probably the best place to go. And I do also have another podcast that is currently active. It's called It's Time to Rewind, and that's similar to a Movies by Minutes podcast, only I tend to look at time loop movies and movies that are similar to time loops, and I look at them one loop at a time.
Oh.
And I'm currently going through 50 First Dates, which is it's I kind of look at it. I had just I did it after Memento, and I kind of look at them as they with their memory issue, they are kind of reliving their own time loop because every day is the same day for them, even though everyone else is going on.
That's quite the juxtaposition.
Yeah,
Memento and 50
so
First
cool.
Dates.
That is really cool. Oh, and so does that mean you're also going to do stuff like Looper and?
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's on my big list, but yeah,
excellent. Because Looper surprised me. Well, I finally got around to watching it after a long time, and I was pleasantly surprised by the mechanic and how it decides to use the mechanic. It definitely decides to take a different approach. The other really good one, though, the one I'd seen before, which is kind of, I wouldn't say it spoiled Looper for me, but which I think is very underrated, is there's a Spanish movie called Time Crimes.
Oh yeah, I covered that one.
Yeah, that's great.
Five episodes. I even have an interview with Nacho Vigalondo.
Oh, fantastic! Nacho's amazing. He's cool.
Yeah,
very very cool. Yeah.
That was a fantastic conversation. I loved talking with him.
Okay, I'm going to listen to that. Thank you for telling me. That sounds amazing. I've got friends who are friends of him. He's big fan as well. But yeah, I think he's a really interesting talent, and I think Time Crimes was an amazing kind of debut. So yeah, and I think that's one of those films I really hope somebody like Vinegar Syndrome like pulls out on Blu-ray and makes available, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who will discover it all over again.
Mhm.
Cool. Right, okay, and yes, you can find us at all good podcast players, as well as on YouTube, Twitter, or aka X, aka whatever it's called by the time you hear us, and Spotify. In all cases, our handle is at Debi Radio, and as well as our website being debiradio.com, and in all of those cases, it is spelt DEBI Radio. That's DEBI Radio.
And if you want to talk with us, you can find us on the Facebook listeners group, which is called Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't a moment, it was a feeling of mood.